Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We're on page 69 now of the 1,775 poems of the Johnson edition of the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. We turn now to Lo at My Problem Bending, another poem about enigma, about perplexity, and in fact this word will get used in this poem for the one time in all of her collection. The question of what is it like to understand Emily is always going to haunt any reader of these poems. The reason we call this series Chats with Emily is that we want to approach, as we have said in earlier lectures, our study of these poems with some sense of grace, with some sense of following her hope that we would deal tenderly with her. This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me. Judge tenderly of me. And as we look at a little set of lines like this, we're going to try to see behind the poet or the writer's mind or psyche and get a sense of what actually is going on, and the problem with the problem, as we'll sometimes reference it as we see it in this poem. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, again, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already been introduced to our set of introductory comments and that you've been already exposed to the previous 68 poems we just finished with Ambition Cannot Find Him. If you've been following us all the way through the previous 68 poems, you'll notice that Emily, that just loves riddling, loves wordplay. But there's always these problems that she's wanting to grapple with. And here, she'll, in some ways, let us step behind the curtain for just a few moments and watch how she deals with problems. She'll say it this way. Lo at my problem bending, another problem comes, larger than mine, serener, involving statelier sums. I check my busy pencil, my figures file away. Wherefore my baffled fingers, thy perplexity? Now, you will remember that at the conclusion of poem 66, just a few poems ago, you will remember that the very last lines of that was, so from cocoon many a worm leap so highland gay, peasants like me, peasants like thee, gaze perplexedly. Now, that's the only use of that word, perplexedly. And that's, of course, the adverbial use. Here, it is perplexity. And the question will be, what is going on with these problems of mine that perplex me so much? Let's go to work now with the poem. We begin with the word lo. Now, of course, lo has all kinds of meanings. Some of you, in your mind's eye, will see her bending over her paper as she's working. Emily, the poet, writing. Notice it begins with the word lo, this line, and ends with bending. Some of you will see the word lo as meaning, right, as in, I'm distraught, I'm musing, I'm working through something. We're all familiar with that idea. Lo at my problem bending, and then notice the repetition, another problem comes. And of course, this is the penultimate experience of any of us that know writing at all, right? Which is all of us. That idea that when I'm in the middle of something, there always seems to be something else that intrudes. Some of you will call this that monkey mind problem, where it's hard to focus on one thing. There always seems to be more things coming up. And we have this sense as we read the poetry of Emily, and it's one of the reasons we call these Chats with Emily, because we would love to be able to actually sit down and chat with Emily, even if it has to be behind that half-closed or half-open door, as we commented about in our introductory set of comments. But we would love to get a sense of the activity of her mind. Several people who had conversations with her walked away saying that she fatigued them because she had just this dynamically active mind, and we have a sense that that's probably the case. She says, I'm working on one problem, and all of a sudden another problem shows up. Notice what she says about it. Larger than mine, and larger than the original problem. In other words, from a small problem to a big problem. I thought what I was dealing with was a big problem, then a bigger problem showed up. But then she uses the word serener. Go back to poem 5 and remember how she used the word there, involving stately or sounds. Hear all these S sounds. Now, some have pointed out the possibility that maybe this is death. In other words, she was dealing with something and then all of a sudden she got message that maybe she lost somebody. We're familiar with that already in these poems. And then the break, the stanza break, and then she tells us how she dealt with this intrusion, this serener intrusion. She says, I check my busy pencil, right? Notice the immediacy of this poem, by the way. I misspoke and said check as in past tense. But notice, lo at my problem bending, another problem comes. It's immediate, it's intense. It's like right here, right now, right? I check my busy pencil. And of course, Emily was busy. I mean, let's point out, we are on poem 69 of a planned for 1,775 poems. She's busy. She is busy, but she checks the busy pencil. My figures file away. In other words, whatever it is I'm working on, I put that away. And then she'll ask herself the question, much like Marcus Aurelius in his meditations, much like St. Augustine in his confessions, she becomes now able to be perspicacious, to look at herself, and she asks this question, wherefore, my baffled fingers, thy perplexity. Now, you'll remember in poem 17, that line, baffled for just a day or two. Perplexity, baffledness, I told you guys, and this was following on our discussion of our talks with Walt when we did all of the poems of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Whitman plays a very similar kind of game. I think they both, Whitman and Emily, learned this from their study of Emerson. This ability to talk to oneself, to converse with oneself, to ask questions of oneself and then try and find answers. Here she says, what about my baffled fingers and this perplexity that I'm dealing with? This is a line, by the way, that Emily was working with and through. The final line was actually written 3 different ways. This way, wherefore my baffled fingers thy perplexity, or wherefore my baffled fingers thine extremity, and then wherefore my baffled fingers time eternity. All of them are of course fun. The idea though of course here is, what is it that intrudes? What is it that keeps me from being able to deal with one problem because I got this larger problem? Perplexity is central then to her project. We will hear her use the word perhaps. And in poem 696, she'll call it acres of perhaps. There's like so many options, so many things that I can focus my mind on. And the moment I think I've got it focused on one problem, another problem shows up. And guess what? That one's even more challenging. Some of you smiling because, of course, this seems to be the human condition, isn't it? Right? Right about the moment that we get focused on one thing, one challenge, whatever it is, here it's a problem, we've got a whole bunch more to show up, right? I think at 2A, the theme message is here is that all problems are somehow relative to the next problem. They're all connected. They're all interrelated. Go back to our introductory set of comments. We call them the Big Five. What do we know about epistemology, knowledge about knowledge? What do we know about ontology and who we are? Of course, psychology and sociology, 2 sides of the same coin. And then finally, the question of theodicy. Why must there be problems? Why must there be pain and suffering? All of those are, of course, working together as we're working through our lives and obviously through these poems. At 2B, I love the variance on the final line. I love Emily as the experimenter who, through her writing, shows us how she is experimenting, how she is curious. Acres of perhaps. At 3A, and I hope you guys don't see this as a far reach, I'm hopeful that it makes sense to you. Do you guys remember when we did Dante's Divine Commedia, the Divine Comedy? I've given full lectures for us at learnstrong.net there. You remember that we have that presage passage. I mean, I said, when I was talking about it, I said to you guys, one of the most important passages in the history of our time together in room 303 is that passage 24. What's going on? Well, Dante the Pilgrim is done. He's had enough of it. He's so tired. He's so overwhelmed. He is going to sit down and not move. And of course, stuck in hell, he says, I've had enough of it. It will be, of course, his guide Virgil that says, up, on your feet. This is no time to tire. The man who lies asleep will never wake in fame, and his desire will slip past him, and he'll say it like fog on a stream, on a river. And then he'll say it. What's he say? There is a longer ladder yet to climb. There is more to do. And I think that standing behind this poem is that recognition by Emily that no matter what our problems are, there's always more problems. Talk to any sixth grader doing math, and that sixth grader will tell you, this is the hardest thing. There's nothing harder than this. Of course, you guys, as high school students or college students, will say, no, that is not hard math. You got calculus coming. That's hard math. No, a sixth grader cannot imagine the possibility of that. You, of course, are able to say, no, harder stuff coming. Which is why when you guys talk to somebody who's 30 or 40 or 50, they will say, oh, no. You think you're dealing with serious math now? No. You got calculus coming. In other words, there's this recognition. There's always more problems coming. And what's the penultimate problem? Oh, well, that's Beowulf's dragon. That's Beowulf's dragon, right? That's the penultimate challenge. And that is, of course, the question of the van when we're swinging at the park. Why? Because we haven't met any 200-year-old people. That is to say, some have read this as, yeah, well, she learned probably of the passing of somebody she cared for, and that's a bigger problem. That's something to have to deal with. Ultimately, of course, we've all got to go to the van, which is why we want to swing so well for the few minutes that we get here on this earth at the park. Now, I would say as well that there's this great writer named Hugh Prather, and he wrote a collection of poems called Notes to Myself, where he said, when I'm tired and I don't know what it is I'm supposed to do, I do something, I choose it randomly, and I do that something with everything I have. And while I'm doing that, it's then that I discover what I'm supposed to be doing. I think Emily would smile at an idea like that. I'm sure Hugh Prather probably borrowed an idea like that from Emily in his study of Emily. Finding a 3B, what was a time in your life? I mean, if we're, guys, if we're doing this study at all, it's so that we can gain something personally from the study. We just don't want to know more about Emily, although that's fun too. What can we own? What can we own or gain from a study like this? And I think one of the things is to ask, what was a time in your life when you were working on one problem and another problem showed up? And the perplexity of how to deal with those was made manifest to you, and then you had to figure out how you did it. How did you do it, and how did you work through it? And what did you learn from the experience of the perplexity? I'm hopeful that Emily will be perplexing us for a while. Thank you.